Imagine walking into a room and instantly noticing someone. Not because they are the loudest, the most stylish, or even the funniest. There's something else about them. Something subtle yet magnetic that makes you remember them long after they've left. You find yourself replaying their smile, the way they nodded at you, the way they seemed to understand without you saying a word. And yet, when you try to put your finger on it, it's almost impossible. What is it that makes them unforgettable? This is the mystery most people chase their entire lives, thinking it's about charm, looks, or social status. But the truth is far simpler, far more powerful, and far more subtle. You might not realize it, but the people who leave a lasting impression do something that most of us overlook entirely. They operate in a quiet, invisible layer of human interaction, one that taps directly into how our brains encode memory and emotion. It's not about being flashy. It's about creating a tiny but profound sense of recognition, a feeling that the person before you truly sees you. And when someone feels seen, when they feel heard and understood, they remember. They remember because human brains are wired to cling to emotional resonance over surface-level information. Names, dates, even impressive achievements fade. But the feeling of connection, that lingers. Consider a story. A few years ago, a friend of mine met a woman at a networking event. She didn't dominate the conversation, she didn't tell grand stories of success, and she didn't wear an eye-catching outfit. What she did was something simpler. She listened. She leaned in at the right moments, nodded, smiled, and asked questions that revealed she remembered details from earlier in the conversation. My friend walked away and kept thinking about her. Not because she was extraordinary in the conventional sense, but because she made him feel significant, seen, and understood. That subtle behavior, active engagement combined with genuine curiosity, created an imprint in his memory that nothing flashy could have done. Contrast that with the dozens of other people he met that evening, who tried hard to impress but didn't pause to truly connect. Their words faded from memory within minutes. Why? Because connection isn't about attention. It's about emotional resonance. And emotional resonance is triggered when someone interacts in a way that aligns with how our brains naturally encode relationships. A smile can be remembered, but a responsive, engaged presence creates a memory that sticks. It's invisible to the untrained eye, but it's profoundly powerful. The subtle behavior I'm talking about often goes unnoticed because it doesn't look like social prowess. It doesn't involve performing or showing off. It's quiet, almost invisible, but it's deliberate. Think of it as the difference between someone throwing confetti in the air and someone planting a seed. One is flashy, fleeting, and forgotten within seconds. The other grows over time, leaving a lasting impact that unfolds every time someone remembers you. People who master this don't need to be the loudest in the room. They don't need to dominate conversations. What they need is presence, attentiveness, and the ability to make someone else feel understood without making it about themselves. Here's where most people miss the point. We think memorability is about making ourselves the center of attention. We try to dazzle with jokes, stories, or achievements. But memorability isn't about you. It's about the effect you create in others. The unforgettable person is someone who can mirror emotion without imitation, who can reflect curiosity without interrogation, and who can create subtle acknowledgement that says, I see you, and you matter. It's almost like leaving a footprint on someone's emotional landscape. Small, quiet, but undeniable. By now, you might be wondering if this is just luck or personality. It's not. This is a skill that can be developed with awareness and practice. It's a conscious attention to cues, emotional subtleties, and micro-interactions that most people ignore. Every smile you return, every detail you remember, every pause you allow for someone to express themselves, these are the building blocks of being unforgettable. And unlike charm, looks, or status, these building blocks are available to anyone willing to pay attention. So, when you meet someone who lingers in your mind, it's rarely because they were extraordinary in the conventional sense. It's because they activated this subtle behavior, this invisible thread of connection that imprints itself in your memory. And here's the exciting part. Once you understand how it works, you can do it too. You can become that person who others remember not for what you show, but for how you make them feel. That's the quiet, invisible power that creates real, lasting impressions. And it's far more effective than any flashy technique you've been taught. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling invisible? Like no one truly noticed you were there. Maybe you shared a story, made a joke, or tried to be charming, but the other person's attention drifted somewhere else. You were left wondering, why do some people fade from memory while others linger effortlessly? The truth is uncomfortable but liberating. It's not about how interesting you are, it's about how you interact. Most of us sabotage ourselves in ways so subtle, we don't even realize it. It often starts with intention. We want to be remembered, so we overcompensate. We talk too much about ourselves, sprinkle in compliments that feel rehearsed, or focus on impressing the other person. But these attempts can backfire. When you dominate the conversation, people feel you're performing for them rather than connecting with them. When compliments are generic, they register as noise. Even small distractions, checking your phone, glancing around the room, signal that your attention is elsewhere. Each tiny misstep chips away at memorability. Contrast this with someone who practices the subtle behavior we discussed earlier. They aren't trying to be noticed. They listen. They respond in ways that make the other person feel seen. And here's the kicker. Our brains are wired to remember these interactions because they trigger emotional engagement. Memory is emotional. It's why you remember the warmth of a teacher who genuinely cared more than the complex formulas they taught. It's why you can recall the laughter shared with a friend years ago but forget the exact words spoken. The unforgettable person creates that emotional imprint every time they interact, while the forgettable person leaves nothing but noise. I remember a coworker, let's call him Alex. He was quiet, even shy, and initially easy to overlook. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, never tried to dominate meetings, and certainly didn't show off. But over time, everyone began remembering him. Why? Because Alex had mastered subtlety without even realizing it. He listened intently, remembered small details about people's lives, and responded in ways that made others feel important. When someone mentioned a weekend trip, he would follow up days later, asking a thoughtful question about it. When a colleague expressed stress, he acknowledged it with genuine empathy. These tiny behaviors didn't make him flashy or extroverted, but they made him unforgettable. Now think about yourself for a moment. Are there times when you've unknowingly made someone feel invisible? Maybe it was a rushed conversation, a distracted comment, or a moment when you focused on your own story rather than theirs. Most of us have been there, and it's not a character flaw, it's a default pattern that social culture reinforces. We are conditioned to present ourselves, to impress, to prove value. But this approach is the exact opposite of what makes you memorable. The subtle behavior we are exploring thrives not in performance, but in attunement. It thrives when the focus shifts from me to you. The emotional tension here is real. When you realize you've been relying on superficial traits to be memorable, it can feel discouraging. You might think, I've been doing it all wrong. But here's the empowering truth. None of this is fixed. You can change. You can retrain your interactions so that every conversation leaves an imprint. And unlike charm or social status, this skill doesn't depend on luck, genetics, or charisma. It depends on awareness, attention, and small, deliberate choices that anyone can make. Let's look at a mini, before and after, scenario. Before understanding this subtle behavior, you meet someone at a networking event. You talk about your achievements, crack a few jokes, and think you've made a great impression. Weeks later, that person barely remembers your name. After embracing this approach, the next event unfolds differently. You ask meaningful questions, remember tiny details from the conversation, nod with genuine understanding, and give them space to share their story. Weeks later, they not only remember you, they mention something you discussed, smile at the memory, and even refer you to someone else. The difference is not what you said, but how you made them feel. It's important to recognize that being forgettable isn't a permanent label. It's a habit, a series of small behaviors that can be reversed. Most people overlook the subtle cues that make someone unforgettable, but once you notice them, you gain a competitive advantage in relationships, networking, and everyday interactions. You move from blending into the background to standing out in the most authentic way possible. By now, you can probably see a pattern. Memorability isn't flashy. It's not about the volume of your voice or the grandeur of your stories. It's about creating emotional resonance, a connection that signals, you matter. I see you. You are remembered. Once you embrace this perspective, the subtle behavior stops being a secret and becomes a practical tool. It's a skill you can practice, refine, and wield in every interaction, transforming how people perceive and remember you. Now that you understand why most people are forgettable and how subtle behaviors create lasting impressions, it's time to reveal the core of the secret. This is the behavior that separates ordinary from unforgettable, the invisible thread that leaves people thinking about you long after you're gone. It's not flashy, it's not complicated, and it's not about trying harder. It's about presence, an intentional, conscious engagement with others that communicates, without words, I see you, and you matter. Once you grasp this, you'll realize why some people linger in your memory while others disappear the moment you part ways. Think of it as emotional mirroring combined with authentic curiosity. You might have heard of mirroring in social psychology, the idea of subtly reflecting someone's body language or tone. But the version that truly makes someone unforgettable goes deeper. It's about reflecting emotion rather than gestures, paying attention not just to words but to how someone feels in the moment, and responding in a way that validates their experience. When done naturally, it doesn't feel like a tactic. It feels like connection. And the brain remembers connection more than any fact, joke, or compliment. Here's how it works in practice. Imagine meeting someone at a coffee shop. Instead of focusing on what witty thing to say next, you focus on how they are feeling. You notice the slight hesitation in their voice when they mention a stressful project. You nod, subtly affirming that you understand the weight of their concern. You ask a thoughtful follow-up, not just out of politeness, but because you genuinely want to hear their perspective. By the end of the conversation, they feel understood in a way they rarely do, and that feeling becomes a mental bookmark. Weeks later, they remember not just your name, but the way you made them feel heard. It might sound simple, but simplicity is deceptive. Most people skip these steps because they seem too subtle to matter. They underestimate the power of attentiveness and overestimate the impact of being impressive. This is where the transformation happens. When you replace the desire to impress with the desire to truly engage, memorability becomes effortless. You don't need to perform. You need to observe, listen, and respond with authenticity. Let's break it down into actionable steps. First, practice focused listening. When someone talks, don't plan your response or think about how you'll impress them. Instead, fully absorb what they're saying. Notice tone, emotion, and body language. Let small details stick in your memory. Second, reflect and validate. This doesn't mean parroting their words back, but acknowledging their experience. A simple, that sounds challenging, I can see why you'd feel that way, goes a long way. Third, remember a personal detail and bring it up later. It could be as small as recalling their favorite coffee blend or a hobby they mentioned. This shows that your attention was real, not performative. Fourth, practice subtle emotional mirroring. Match the energy of their conversation. If they're excited, match their enthusiasm. If they're contemplative, adopt the softer tone. The goal is not mimicry but resonance. Stories of transformation highlight the power of this approach. A friend of mine, let's call her Maya, was always socially shy. She would fade into group conversations, often feeling unnoticed. After learning to focus on emotional presence, she began implementing these subtle behaviors. At her next gathering, she made a few small but intentional gestures, maintaining attentive eye contact, asking thoughtful follow-ups, and validating emotions rather than jumping to impress. By the end of the evening, people were actively seeking her out, remembering not just her name but how she made them feel. Her social life shifted completely, not because she became extroverted, but because she mastered the quiet art of presence. The psychological science behind this is fascinating. Our brains prioritize emotional memory over factual memory. We forget names, dates, and achievements quickly, but the way someone made us feel sticks. This subtle behavior leverages that cognitive pattern. By consistently creating moments of emotional resonance, you leave a lasting imprint in someone's memory. You become the person whose presence is remembered even when nothing else is. The beauty of this approach is that it's universally applicable. It works in professional settings, casual friendships, romantic interactions, and even brief encounters with strangers. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to practice presence, empathy, and attentive engagement. Over time, these behaviors compound. People begin associating your presence with understanding, warmth, and genuine connection. You don't need tricks, scripts, or rehearsed lines. You need attention, awareness, and consistency. Finally, remember the mindset shift. This isn't manipulation. This isn't a social hack to make people like you superficially. This is about being genuinely present, connecting authentically, and honoring the human need to be seen. When you approach every interaction with this mindset, memorability is a natural byproduct. People don't just remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. And that is the essence of being unforgettable. By embracing this subtle behavior, you step into a different social reality. You move from being overlooked to being valued. You transition from blending into standing out in a quiet, lasting way. And the incredible part? It's fully within your control. With practice, awareness, and intentionality, anyone can cultivate this presence and leave a lasting mark on every person they meet. Now imagine what your life would look like if you consistently applied this subtle behavior in every interaction. Every conversation would become an opportunity to leave a lasting impression, not through loud gestures or flashy accomplishments, but through the quiet power of genuine presence. People would remember you not just for what you say, but for how you make them feel. You would become the kind of person others seek out, the one whose presence leaves a lasting imprint, the one who transforms ordinary interactions into moments of connection that linger in memory. Think about the ripple effect. One thoughtful question, one moment of true listening, one acknowledgement of someone's feelings can change how they experience the world. That ripple spreads, influencing friendships, professional opportunities, and even casual encounters. You begin to notice subtle shifts. Colleagues remembering your insights, friends recalling personal details, strangers smiling because of the connection you sparked. It's a profound transformation that doesn't require more effort. It just requires a shift in focus from impressing others to truly seeing them. This is where empowerment meets practicality. The subtle behavior we've explored isn't a gimmick. It's a skill you can practice, refine, and use immediately. You don't need to be naturally outgoing, charismatic, or charming. All you need is awareness, intention, and consistency. Each time you choose presence over performance, empathy over self-centeredness, engagement over distraction, you step closer to becoming unforgettable. The best part is that this transformation is entirely within your control. You hold the key to becoming the person people remember, respect, and value, not because you try harder, but because you connect deeper. As you move forward, commit to observing your interactions through this lens. Notice the moments when you truly engage versus when you drift into autopilot. Celebrate the small wins, the conversations where someone lights up because you remembered something they said, the interactions where your attentiveness leaves a lasting impression. Over time, these small but intentional behaviors compound, creating a life where memorability isn't forced, it's natural. Ultimately, being unforgettable isn't about fame, recognition, or being the center of attention. It's about connection, presence, and the quiet power of making others feel seen. When you embrace this mindset, every conversation becomes an opportunity, every relationship becomes deeper, and every interaction leaves a positive mark. Step into this approach today, and watch how your life transforms as people begin to remember you not for superficial reasons, but for the enduring impact of how you make them feel.